My name is Benjamin Zephaniah. I am a poet living and working in Britain, in London, and I write or create performance poetry, poetry that is primarily created for performance. Some people have labelled this poetry dub poetry, reggae poetry, performance poetry, hip-hop poetry, rap poetry. I myself am not too concerned with the labels. I just consider myself a human being who is desperately trying to express themselves. Because of the need to try and explain what kind of poetry I perform, I wrote this poem that attempts to describe my poetry. It's called This Poetry. This poetry is like a rhythm that drops. The tongue brings a rhythm that shoots like a shot. This poetry is designed for ranting, dancehall style, big mouth chanting. This poetry won't put you to sleep saying, follow me like your blind sheep. This poetry is not party political, not designed for those who are critical. This poetry goes with me when I go to my bed. It gets into my dreadlocks and it lingers around my head. This poetry is with me when I am riding my bike. I have tried Shakespeare, respect you dear, but this is the stuff I like. This poetry is not afraid of going in a book, no, but this poetry needs ears to hear and eyes to have a look. Yes, this poetry is verbal rhythm, no big words involved. And if I have a problem, the rhythm gets it solved. I have tried to be romantic. It did no good for me. I take a reggae rhythm and build my poetry. I could try something personal, but you've heard it all before. No written words are needed because plenty words in store. This poetry is called dub ranting. The tongue plays a beat and the body starts skanking. This poetry is quick and childish. This poetry is for the wise and foolish. Anybody can do it for free. This poetry is for you and me. Don't stretch your imagination. This poetry is for the good of the nation. Chant in the morning. I chant in the night. I chant in the darkness and under the spotlight. I passed through university. I passed through sociology and then I got a dread degree in dreadful ghettoology. This poetry is with me when I take a walk, and when I am talking to myself in poetry I talk. This poetry is with me, below me and above. You see, this poetry is from inside me and goes to you with love. The nature of our form of poetry means that by default it's political. It tends to come from people who don't have a voice in society, who don't have a voice in the media. So you find that the majority of performance or dub poets, for example, are female. You find that they are, in Britain in particular, in America, they are black or Asian. That is because they need to bypass publishers and they need to have a direct relationship with the audience. And because of the situations they come from, they find a need to voice their concerns and talk about their surroundings. This next poem is a poem I wrote many years ago about class division back in Britain, but it can apply anywhere in the world, I believe, and it's called Us and Them. Us and them, it is us and them, when will this thing ever end? Us and them, it is us and them, you must know your enemy from your friend, because the enemy is near, could be in here. Don't get paranoid, just beware, because the enemy is seen with a smiling face, but them really come to destroy the place. Us and them, it is us and them, when will this thing ever end? Us and them, it is us and them, you must know your enemy from your friend. Now I hear them talking about unity, them have a plan for the ethnic minority. Them say liberation, totally, but them have other things as priority. Them hold a conference annually to look at the state of equality, and them claim them fighting hard for me, but I won't do it independently, because the us, well, that is anyone who suffers and are found in the gutter with no food to eat. And us, well, we are clearly frustrated with just not debated when Parliament meet. And them, well, they are known by their fruits. They have many troops to batter you down. And them, well, now them have power, but there shall be an hour when the table turn round. Listen, us and them, it is us and them. So when will this thing ever end? Us and them, it is us and them. You must know your enemy from your friend. Yeah, know your enemy from your friend. no, face the facts no, you can't pretend no. It's like this poem, some call it art. There is a struggle, see, it plays a part. I know people very trendy, talking to me very friendly. But they are coping, so now they're voting all their friends in who oppress we. How them oppress we? Well, them arrest we. And then they're giving we judge and jury. Some may start some demonstrating, but the prison cell is waiting. On the telly, them talk for a while with them fancy words and them plastic smile. And that party politics play another trick. No love for the old, there is no love for the sick. Listen, us and them, it is us and them. Say, when will this thing ever end? Us and them, it is us and them. You must know your enemy from your friend. No, I hear them talking about world peace, but there's war at home and the war will not cease till all the queen's horses, women and men find a new direction and start again. Well, politicians talk about world economics, but read the manifesto, it reads like a comic. When they talk about housing, the mouth starts sprouting words that forever and forever you are doubting. But if you in doubt, you don't have a shout. If you talk against them say get out. Some call it democracy, I call it hypocrisy. It make me start feel revolutionary. And when me start we feel this style, I just stop. And after a while I ask, is it me class or is it me colour or is it a thing that I don't discover? Check it. Us and them, it is us and them. Say, when will this thing ever end? Us and them, it is us and them. You must know your enemy from your friend, yeah. Us and them, it is us and them. And me say, when will this thing reach a conclusion? Us and them, it is us and them. Pick your place from now before the confusion. Us, So is it us, or is it them you get it, or is it them just check it? Another thing about performance poetry is that, and dub poetry, reggae poetry, it is sometimes peppered with humour. And this one poem is a poem where I look at the English language and cast a kind of humorous eye over the language. It always struck me that the English language was full of words that where black things meant were bad and the good things were white. And so I kind of politically corrected, if you will, the English language from a black man's point of view. And I came up with this, white comedy. I was white-mailed by a white witch with white magic and white lies, branded a white sheep. I slaved as a white smith near a white spot where I suffered white water fever. White-listed as a white leg, I was in the white book as a master of the white arts. It was like white death. People call me White Jack. Others call me White Wog. So I joined the White Watch, trained as a white guard, lived off the white economy. I was caught and beaten by the white shirts and condemned to a white mass. Don't worry, I shall be writing to the Black House. There's a man beating his wife. The woman just lost her life. Them call that domestic strife. What has that got to do with me? Babies are buried on the floors in a church behind closed doors. I don't know the bloody cause. What has that got to do with me? I've seen all the documentaries, and there's nothing I can do. I've listened to the commentaries. Why should I listen to you? If I'm told to go, I vote. If I need money, I strike. If I'm told not to, then I won't. I want the best deal out of life. The fit cannot go jogging because there's someone out there mugging when they should be spreading loving. What has that got to do with me? Me and you must just stand back because they're gonna bomb Iraq. It's a surgical attack. What has that got to do with me? I just want to live my life, yeah, so just leave me alone. Why should I fight the state when I am trying to buy my home? I just want to earn my bread, guy, and feed my family. You may starve and you may die, but what has that got to do with me? Poets are dying in Nigeria or forced to leave the area. Multinationals are superior. What has that got to do with me? And in some West End I've heard that she can't say a word and he must grow a beard. What has that got to do with me? What has that got to do with me? I'm just this guy from Birmingham and all I want to do is live good in the neighborhood. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just your average football fan and some foreign teams are very, very good. Why should you worry yourself? You cannot change a single thing. All you got to do is take what you can get. Why should you worry yourself? Try hard and you will die trying. And what can any of us do about Tibet? I see 1 million refugees on 20 million TVs and I think, who the hell are these? What has that got to do with me? Hurry up, I've got no time. Don't you mess with what is mine. Yes, I've signed the dotted line. What has that got to do with me? Your school has just been closed down. Your taxis buying bombs. And although you come from downtown, you don't know where you're coming from. You don't know what you are eating. Your food has a terrible taste. And you can be sure that you are drinking some kind of chemical waste. There's a price upon your head, even though you're newlywed. A police just shot you dead. What has that got to do with me? And down in the police station, they are killing the black nation. But that's normal race relations. What has that got to do with me? What has that got to do with me? What has that got to do with the man upon the corner that is selling guns so we can kill each other as we rave? Or the crackhead who is trying to crack up everyone, taking all your cash as you become a slave? Or the mother in the gutter who is begging bread where the man dressed in a Gucci heels a cab? All I'm trying to do is praise the Lord, it must be said. And what has that got to do with anything I've had? A baby from Pakistan is making footballs for the man. Or is she an Indian? And what has that got to do with me? And there's no proper propaganda about Malawi or Rwanda, and all this makes me wonder, what has that got to do with me? I used to go on demonstrations, now my feet can't take the pace. I've tried to be a vegan, but there's egg up on my face. My last stand was the miners' strike. I did the cop patrol. Now it's air conditioning that I like, and I just don't need any coal. Indonesia needs more British arms for East Timor, more Western bombs to bomb the poor. What has that got to do with me? And over in Algeria, they say there's another massacre. Isn't that a part of Africa? What has that got to do with me? And I don't want to go to an American death row. There's no compassion there, I know. But what has that got to do with me? My gosh! I can see you have been tortured. And your wife has been drawn and quartered. And your children have been slaughtered. But what has that got to do with me?
Oh, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
This remarkable sense of rhythm that comes through. What do you attribute it to?
Well, I was actually born in Birmingham, in a place in England. But the area where I was born was called Handsworth. So Handsworth to me was just an outpost of Jamaica. The music we listened to was the music from Jamaica. The food we had was the food from Jamaica. I was just surrounded by Jamaicans. It was like a Jamaican community. And listening to the music of Jamaica is very poetic. I mean, there's a lot of political commentary. There's a lot of poetry, sometimes poetry that's taken from biblical texts or Quranic texts. Sometimes that's mixed with nursery rhymes. My mother also, although she wasn't a singer as such, she kind of did poetry around the house, and it was always this kind of rhythmic poetry. So it's kind of, I grew up hearing poetry, which is one thing that's connected to the oral tradition really, but also listening to music of Jamaica, and this whole thing is full of rhythm, both the poetry and the music.
And this tremendous pace and movement, does it have anything to do with jazz?
It has more to do with reggae, but reggae has something to do with jazz, if you know what I mean. I mean, indirectly it has something to do with jazz. You could say in a way that much of our the reggae originally came from some of the sounds of Africa, and particularly the west coast of Africa, the Ashanti tribes. Those drums kind of came into Jamaica. They mixed that with the Western style electric guitar and the bass guitar, but applied a kind of African rhythm to it. Then they took melodies and things from America, from jazz and from the soul of America. It's an interesting mixture of things, because the Jamaica is on the Caribbean coast, it's near America, but the people came from Africa, and then there's the original American Indians that were on the island, so there's a whole mix. And even Indian, actually, because of the indentured labourers that went to Jamaica, have added to this whole, a new culture that was created in Jamaica.
And apart from this, there's a new syntax that comes through, a kind of liberty that you take with the normal English sounds. Now, is there any special effect intended?
Well, I think that well, I know that the way that English is used in the Caribbean is very different to the way that English is used in England. And one could say the same about India, of course. Some academics say that it's kind of English with an African accent. But what we do with the words is we kind of, the words have a different accent, that's one thing. But also when you hear in a poem like this poetry, you hear the line that says, I passed through university, I passed through sociology, and then I got a dread degree in dreadful ghettoology. I mean, this is something that we always do with the English language. We slightly change words to give them a new meaning, to give them a slightly new sense of syntax, if you like. I mean, ghettoology, there's no such word, but we use it to explain kind of learning from the street upwards rather than from the universities. Somebody will not say oppressor, they will say downpresser because they keep you down. Yeah. You know, somebody will not say understanding. Because politicians say they understand us all the time, but they stand over us and we are stood under, if you know. We say overstanding. You know, this means a greater empathy with the people is overstanding. So a slight twist on the word, it's being playful with the words, but it's not just being playful for playfulness sake, it has a deeper meaning. I mean, overstanding is a real empathy with you. It's not just, hello, nice boy, well done. It's I really understand what you're saying.
Well, I suppose then the same could be said about the harder consonants that your poetry uses. So could you use more of this than this, let's say, for example. Now, these harder consonants, is there a sense of dissonance or being jarring in your relationship with that's being conveyed there?
It's simply writing, if I can put the two words together, honestly, phonetically. You know, we listen to the way that people speak. And, you know, the only people that speak the Queen's English, quite frankly, is the Queen and a few of her friends. I mean, and we want to capture the rhythm and the sound of everyday speech. And this is where it comes from. It's interesting, in academia, people ask questions about where it comes from, and it was only after doing it for a long time I started to think about it myself. And when I go back to my early days of writing, without studying any poetry at all, without studying any literature, it was that most basic thing. I used to listen to Shakespeare or read Shakespeare and read Shelley, and Shelley was somebody I loved very much, and I found it very difficult at first to get into the language that they use. But then I got to understand or overstand that this was actually everyday language, that people in Shakespeare's time didn't struggle so hard to understand it. Shelley in particular, who was one of my favourites, loved performing, and people didn't struggle to understand him because it was common language. And this is what I want to do with my poetry. I believe that most people ignore most poetry because most poetry ignores most people. So I want to create a poetry that people identify with because they hear this language daily.
The kind of polarity that emerges from a poem like Us and Them, there could be another stance which would be more in sync with the mainstream. Now, what is needed is essentially some kind of a dialogue, whether from a dominant position or from a marginalized position, but nevertheless some kind of a bridging of those gaps. So do you think this kind of polarity that Us and Them projects, or a kind of sense of separateness that it projects, will that be, is it something that will be useful in the long run, or are there any short-term contingent compromises to be made politically?
I think a poem like Us and Them comes from a sense of despair and a sense of anger. In Britain, class is a very big issue. It's very big. You walk into a room and you speak, and you know, the upper classes will say if you're one of us or them. Well, they won't say it openly, but they'll know. And I mean, there's another thing about colour and race, which is something I also talk about. But even within the black and Asian communities now, there is these people who aspire to be upper class, and as I said, the way you speak, the way you introduce yourself, will dictate to them exactly how they respond back to you. But there's no doubt about it that class is a really important factor in British social life. And in the poem, I have to, I lay it out, and I do say that, you know, it is us and them, and it's going to take a long time before there is kind of any coming together of this. The idea that you can simply buy people out of the community by making them middle or upper class, to me is one which is flawed, you know, because even today in Britain, you know, we have some conditions which are third world like. I mean, we talk about, you know, child labour in India and Pakistan. Well, you know, we have it. We have it in well, I don't want to bring court cases upon me now, but we have it in large stores that employ children very early in the morning to come and do packaging. News agents that send children in the dead of the night or early in the morning to sell newspapers. So, you know, I think it's going to be a long time before there is some kind of coming together, and a poem like Us and Them, it doesn't sound hopeful, and I suppose it's because I am not hopeful yet. I mean, I think we have a long way to go.
One last question. You travel a lot, and you've been to India before, and you're in India now, and you're on record as saying that you like India very much. Now, being in India, mixing with the people here, mingling with them, being on the street, is there a bit of dissolution of this sense of separateness? Does it get dissolved a bit?
From my point of view, being here, well, it's difficult for me to say because I haven't lived here, although I've visited here a lot. Certainly, I stand out here, and people, you know, are attracted to me, and people want to touch my hair, but I don't sense racism here, not me personally. So in that sense, no. I mean, but I will always be a visitor here, and I go and talk literally to people on the streets, and you know, they have a different take on things. But for me, you know, I will always be an outsider. And one of the interesting things about, you know, people like me, black people born in Britain, and for that matter, even many people of Indian origin born in Britain, they will say that actually they don't feel at home anywhere. In Britain, they are blacks or Pakis or Indians or something. When they come to India, they're not quite Indian. And when I go to Jamaica, I'm not Jamaican. And, you know, my mother says to me the last time I was coming to India, she said, you know, son, you are of Jamaican origin, and you've been to India more times than you've been to Jamaica.
And how has it felt being in Africa for you?
Africa, I mean, it's always been important. For us Jamaicans, we've always seen it as a spiritual and physical homeland. So it is very important. But quite frankly, one thing that travelling has made me is an internationalist. And I can make my home anywhere. It doesn't mean that I'm completely accepted and I'm completely at home, if you like, but I'm willing to travel anywhere, and I'm willing to give anywhere a try.
Oh, it was wonderful to talk to you, Dr. Zafar Nayak.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure having you here with
pleasure.
us. Thank you.